This episode of Hitched to Homicide contains depictions of sexual assault. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is a victim of sexual violence, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 800-656-4673, or you can chat online at online.rain.org. All calls are free and confidential.
Tuesday, July 28, 1987, Stephenville, Texas. Susan Woods is home that evening in her little house. Newly separated from her husband Michael, she allows someone into her home. When she doesn't show up for work 2 days in a row, her father goes to check on her, and what he finds will keep police in the dark and looking for her killer for 20 years, accusing one man while her murderer was right under their noses. This is the story of Susan Woods, hidden in plain sight. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in Sardinia, Italy.
Oh!
Bene, benyu. There you go.
Si.
Grazie.
I just said that a lot when we were in Italy.
Yes.
I said it a lot.
Yeah.
Si. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are just like you, a true crime aficionado,
Yes.
can find us. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Please.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime with us every single day, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go into Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you're in. Go join. Lots of fun in there. That is our true crime family.
It is, and it's a lot of fun.
It is fun. And I like to post photos and other stuff in there as well.
Yep.
We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Please
He drinks it
I need my coffee.
every single episode. You can find that link in our show notes. We appreciate all your messages and your emails and your comments on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
All of the above.
We just appreciate your support. So thank you for being with us each and every week.
Thank you.
This case is a little crazy and, well, it's really crazy. And you're going to be...
Like none of the other cases.
I know. Well, they're all nuts. I seem to pick the ones that are really, I like, because I write thrillers and suspense novels, I like a good twist.
Well, let's do this. Let's do, on a scale of 1 to 10 crazy, what would this be?
This is probably a 9,
Oh, wow.
9.5.
Okay, we'll start scaling those.
Just for the fact that the killer was right there.
Oh, wow.
And they let him go so many times.
Okay.
So everybody's going to be mad at the police force today. I'm just going to forewarn you now.
All right.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Newser.com, Deseret.com, Beneath the Surface News, ABC News, Texas Monthly, Longreads.com, DGEpress.com, Statesman.com, Yahoo.com, The Cinemaholic, NBC News, and Find a Grave.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Susan Jeanette Atkins was born on April 6, 1957, in Gillespie County, Texas, to parents Joe and Irma Atkins.
Joe and Irma.
She had one brother, Ronald. And she grew up in a small-town environment. She was described as a very quiet and shy girl. She had a beautiful smile, and she had beautiful brown hair. She was very close to her family, particularly her mother, and she was really known to be like this very sweet and timid girl.
She just had that little Texas flair.
She was a good little Texas girl, but very shy and just sort of, in her own world. She didn't really bother anybody.
Right.
She was just very shy.
Got it.
During her high school years, Susan was involved in the Stephenville High School Band, where she played the clarinet. Me too, Susan. And she formed a close relationship with her fellow clarinetist, Cindy Hallmark.
Okay.
Now, Susan doesn't date much during her high school years, and she didn't even attend her own prom. Like I said, she's just very quiet and reserved. But after high school, Susan worked some really long hours at a nursing home, and she was known to be extremely hardworking, and she had a very caring nature.
I was about ready to say, it sounds like she would have been very caring.
Yes.
Yeah.
During Susan's early years, she's just really trying to have a good, fulfilling life in this tiny town of Stephenville, Texas.
Sure.
So she was really known as a person who would do anything to help anybody else if she could.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephenville is so tiny. It's filled with dairy farms and farmers. Every guy there drives a pickup truck. It is a dry county. You can't buy alcohol there at all.
Sounds like a fun place.
And there are only about 13,000 God-fearing people who live there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Dry county.
Okay.
In town, there was a statue of a dairy cow they named Moolah. It sits in the town square.
All right.
It had that Texas small town feel. So lots of 4-H activities and high school football games are really big.
I was in 4-H.
And the kids, were you?
Yeah, I took woodworking because my dad had a woodworking shop there, and I learned how to build.
You're a secret woodworker?
I'm glad that you have retained all your digits because those are the money makers. We can't cut those off.
No, that'd be bad news.
But she did something else I think you probably did.
What?
Because Rob grew up in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
The kids would cruise the town between two Dairy Queens.
Oh, yeah.
On a Sunday, you went to church, and if you weren't from there, you were noticed pretty quickly. You were an outsider. Which brings me to Michael Woods. Michael was born in Indianapolis, and in second grade, he moved to El Paso, Texas. His mother was running away from what he would call a series of really bad marriages and relationships.
Okay.
And later, Michael is going to say that his upbringing was really erratic. It was a little bit abusive. They didn't have a lot of money. They moved all the time. And one of his mom's many boyfriends was usually in that mix.
So they're not going to make a Disney documentary out of this.
No, no. Quote, she was a little hellion. She liked to party and have kids, end quote.
Wow.
And she did, because Michael had 7 siblings.
Good Lord.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of kids.
Ladies, anybody who has more than a couple, hats off to you.
That's called a litter.
Yeah, that's a lot. When he's 15, his mother remarries again and the family moved to Virginia. It was then that Michael began leaving home for these really long stretches of time. He'd just disappear. He had learned how to play the guitar. He really loved it, especially Southern rock like Marshall Tucker and Leonard Skinner.
I like to think of Jesus like with giant eagle's wings and singing lead vocals for Leonard Skinner.
Well, that was the first thing that made him go downhill is learning to play guitar.
You got to stay away from the guitar players.
Exactly. Oh, wait a minute.
What can I say? I married one. When he's away from home, he liked to play his guitar on the street corners and at a few clubs, mostly along the East Coast. And then he would just couch surf. And he's always about one step away from being homeless. But according to him, quote, that wasn't as rough as being at home, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah. When he's 20 or so, a friend in El Paso is moving to Stephenville, Texas, and he asked him to drive the truck there. And he arrived in small town Texas in the late 70s, and when the friend needed just a little bit more help, he just stayed on. And a few years out of high school at the time, Susan told friends that she spotted him on the drag one night, somewhere in between the two Dairy Queens.
Well, I have to interrupt for a second because that brings back such great memories because in my hometown, you drove up Main Street, up the hill, took a left, went by Frisch's, take another left, go back down.
Yeah.
Down to the Big Four Bridge, turn around, do it all over again. And that's what you did every Friday night.
I mean, I lived in a small town for a little while, and the kids called it scooping the loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They just kept going around the same ones. And that was kind of back when you could, like, hang out in the back of the pickup truck.
Yeah.
And the police weren't going to stop you. You know, just be a bunch of people in the back of the pickup truck.
Good times.
But Susan sees him in between the two Dairy Queens. But Michael will say that they met when he was playing pinball in a convenience store, and she walked in.
Pinball, eh?
He's playing pinball.
Wow. So this town really had it going on because we didn't have a pinball machine.
But I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah.
There were so few places that had pinball machines, even, you know, when I was growing up. I'm a little bit younger than these folks.
Yeah.
But that was always something that was so cool to have a pinball machine somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
But remember, Susan's really quiet and shy and a mama's girl. She's really naive, but she fell hard for Michael. She thought he was adorable. She liked his long hair. He had shoulder-length brown hair. She thinks he looks like Bob Seger.
Oh, wow.
But her friends, like Cindy, they're like, girl, nuh-uh.
Yeah.
Girl, don't do it.
Yeah, think this one over.
They thought he acted like a 14-year-old boy. They thought he was really immature. And Susan was always out working her butt off at this nursing home, and he was just always up for a good time. Mm-hmm. He was light on hard work, but into having a party.
Do you think maybe she had this maternal thing that she felt like she had to take care of someone that wasn't, you know, mature or whatever?
I think she definitely had a mother instinct, a motherly instinct, a maternal instinct, I should say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she hasn't really ever dated.
Well.
And she's been kind of quiet. So she meets this guy, and they somehow get introduced to each other, and he shows an interest in her. I mean, she's falling for the first guy that, you know, pays attention to her, or she allows to pay attention to her.
Right.
But her friend Cindy doesn't like him, and these two had a fight. That's their first and last fight, I read. But just because Cindy didn't like him and didn't think he was good enough for her friend, she just didn't think he was good enough for Susan.
Right.
And Susan's parents kind of felt the same way. When she first brought him home to meet the folks, well, it wasn't what Joe and Irma had exactly wanted for their sweet, beautiful, hardworking daughter.
Imagine that.
When he showed up at their home, okay, let's just stop for a second.
Okay.
If you're going to meet the parents, what do you think you do? Do you, like, put on your best face, best clothes? You want to make an impression, right?
Absolutely.
Well, when he showed up at their home, according to Michael, it was hotter than the hinges of hell that day. He didn't say that. He just said it was hot. It was Texas hot. Hot, like H-A-U-T, hot.
Hot.
And he's wearing a pair of cut-off jeans and sandals and nothing else.
Oh, man. Oh, Michael.
And when Irma opened the door, she's surprised to say the least. She thought it was very inappropriate to walk around without a shirt on. I do too. Not to mention not wearing a shirt when you're meeting the parents.
Yeah. Wasn't exactly a good move on his part.
Not a good impression. Not a good first impression.
Yep.
And Susan's mom and dad and Cindy were not fans. And according to Michael, Susan's dad, Joe, didn't waste any time showing him his .357 Magnum and said,
anything happens to my daughter, I got a 45 and a shovel. I doubt anybody would miss you.
quote, if you ever hurt my daughter, I'm going to shoot you, end quote.
There you go. I always said when our daughter started dating, I was like, well, looks like I'm going to have to get a rocking chair and a bigger gun.
But this is Texas, so there's that long-held belief and tradition in Texas. It's God and guns, and if you break the law, you're going to meet both of them.
Yep.
Another reason Susan's parents and her best friend really didn't like Michael was because he never really looked for or found any steady work while he's living in Stephenville. And part of the reason was because Michael had long hair.
Yeah.
He liked to play guitar. He would wear this leather jacket and boots, and he had a beard, and he had a bad attitude.
Mm-hmm.
He rode a motorcycle around town. He's a guy with a motorcycle and a guitar, Rob. What are we going to do about this?
I don't know.
And she's going to marry him.
Yeah.
So hang on.
Yeah. Oh, geez. this can't be any good.
He's not a redhead. He's not a redhead.
Okay, well, I got that going for me.
There were whispers around town because, this is a town everybody knows everybody else's business.
Mm-hmm.
The whispers around town is that he's dealing in weed.
Uh-huh.
Now, Michael has always denied this, but he didn't like a regular 9-to-5 job. He didn't go to church or the football games, and he just liked to lie about without his shirt on in the front yard next to his Harley, where he would sometimes lift weights.
Lifting our huge triangular iron weights.
Well, if I laid in the front yard with my shirt off, the HOA would come and take me away.
I'm painting a picture for you. Have I painted a good picture of Michael for you?
It's perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
He will, over the years, apparently work in a hayfield, at a Sonic, at an auto parts factory, as well as a place that made feeders for cows. But Susan's the one who's making all the money. But in 1980, Michael talked Susan into returning with him to El Paso, Texas, where his uncle had promised him a job. And soon after they got to El Paso, Susan and Michael got married. She told Michael that her parents would, quote, disown her, end quote, if she was shacking up with a man she wasn't married to.
Okay.
And she point blank asked him, can we get married? And he said, well, I can take the day after tomorrow off, and we can do it.
What a guy.
Michael, you old sentimental fool, you.
What a romantic.
How romantic.
These two head down to the courthouse and the justice of the peace all by themselves, and they get married.
Okay.
And when Susan told her parents, what do you think they thought?
Oh, they were so thrilled. It was amazing.
They were beside themselves. Michael wasn't the husband they wanted for their daughter, not by a long shot.
Yeah.
To nobody's surprise, the job Michael's uncle had for him doesn't pan out. And these two have to start selling off their things. They're pawning their belongings just to make ends meet.
Wow.
And Susan actually wrote a letter to her best friend Cindy saying that she was living off bacon bit sandwiches.
Wow.
Now, of course, it doesn't take long before the two of them are back in Stephenville. And here's what these two have discovered. Michael hates it in Stephenville, and Susan wanted her husband to be happy, but she didn't want to live anywhere else but Stephenville.
Right.
And they will, at one point, move to Indianapolis so that Michael can be near one of his siblings, a brother. But it didn't seem to matter where they tried to settle. It was always the same thing, over and over. They'd find a place, get all set up, and then Michael would want to move away. And Susan would have to quit her job, move away, sell all their stuff again, and then they would stay a month wherever they ended up, and they'd starve before they would come back to Stephenville and start all over again.
So they were just living the dream.
Yeah, I mean, she's trying to make him happy. She's really trying to make him happy.
Wow.
In 1985, Susan found a little house on McNeil Street near downtown Stephenville. She would work, and Michael mostly hung out in the yard with his shirt off, lifting weights. And he didn't get along with some of his neighbors. You know, the guys in the trucks with the cowboy hats and the hard work ethic.
Yeah.
He starts acting out. He pours sugar into the gas tank of one of his neighbors after a verbal altercation.
Oh, my gosh.
And if the Stephenville police weren't watching him all the time anyway, now they're really watching him.
Yeah.
And according to Michael, they would pick him up or stop him all the time for no good reason. Meanwhile, Susan's family and friends are wondering how much longer is she going to put up with this crap? How much longer is she going to stay married to this guy?
Right.
Still, every day, Susan is coming home dead dog tired after her shift. She would cook him dinner. She would take care of the house. But Michael wasn't working. And it's about this time he tells her he wants to start flipping houses.
Okay.
Now, Susan's the breadwinner, and she didn't want to sink any of her hard-earned money into buying homes that Michael may or may not follow through with flipping and then selling. Because he can't really hold down a job and stay in one place at a time. So
Right.
I don't think she has that confidence that he would be able to follow through.
I can't imagine why.
Well, this is about the time that Michael started accusing Susan of emasculating him.
Okay.
Then finally, in the summer of 1986, Michael tells Susan, it's either Texas or it's me. And Susan chose
Texas.
She chose Texas.
Good for her.
He moves away, and they try to reconcile a couple of times. But in February of 1987, Michael had left Texas for good, taking with him their car, a yellow Mustang. What did he leave behind? Well, a cassette tape he'd made for Susan. And it's not a bunch of guitar songs. It's not a bunch of original tunes.
Okay.
He leaves her this cassette where he berates Susan for destroying their marriage. It's all your fault, Susan. It was 30 minutes of you are such a bitch and it's all your fault. Your parents never gave me a chance. That kind of nonsense.
Wow.
But it gets worse.
Okay.
He left these handwritten notes all over the house for her to find, like inside kitchen cabinets and in coat pockets. He wanted her to find these notes like months and months after he was gone.
Wow.
And all of them are saying to her what a horrible person she is, what a terrible wife she was. And Susan is devastated. And what's more, she's afraid for her life.
Yeah.
What might Michael do to her? How might he exact his revenge?
Yeah, I mean, this guy obviously is a little unstable.
Yeah, he seems to think he's been wronged somehow, right?
Yeah.
Her mom wants her to move home, but she refuses. Her best friend, Cindy, did come over and sleep on the couch until Susan felt safe again. Cindy's husband, Roy, nailed all of her windows shut, and he loaned her a gun.
Wow.
Now, Susan pulled herself up by the bootstraps. She put on her big girl panties, and she filed for divorce. And then she started to feel better about herself and her life. She worked her ass off 6 days a week in order to save enough money to buy a car, because he took their car.
Yeah.
She had turned over a new leaf. She was really, really happy. And she'd even started seeing a guy named J.C. Bauman, a bartender who worked in Granbury, Texas.
He actually had a job.
Where you could buy liquor, and he did have a job, yeah.
Yeah.
These two meet one night when Susan and some of her work friends came into his bar. These two had cuddled on the couch for a few nights, and then they slept together only once. Still, she kept her social circle very small. She did her laundry on Sundays. She hung out with her girlfriends when she could. She really didn't get to see JC all that much.
Okay, was this by choice or just because of their schedules?
I mean, I think it was partly because of their schedules, but at the same time, he wasn't somebody that she wasn't ready to spend her life again with. She wasn't ready to say I do again to anybody or get into a long-term relationship.
So he wasn't Mr. Right. He was Mr. Right now.
Don't go looking for Mr. Right. Look for Mr. Right now.
He was Mr. Right now. That's exactly it, sweetheart. Very good.
Thank you.
But sometime in late June or early July of 1987, Susan calls her friend Debbie Hardy from work saying that she needed to talk to her. Quote, I've got to talk to somebody, end quote. And Debbie goes to her house and Susan's crying. She has these hickey marks on her neck and she's just beside herself, saying that she didn't know how or why she let it happen and she was afraid of what everybody in town was going to think of her. Susan also told her best friend Cindy the whole story. J.C. Bauman got a little fresh. The bartender got a little fresh with her one night, got a little carried away, and after the hickeys, Susan kicked J.C. to the curb.
Gotcha. And it's a little hard to disguise hickeys in Texas in 98-degree weather.
Well, it's February, but yeah,
okay.
I mean, still.
87-degree weather.
Yeah. But Susan is enjoying, aside from the hickeys, her single life. She was the happiest she'd been in a really long time.
Right.
On Friday, the 24th of July, Cindy and Roy, a man who would eventually become her husband, took Susan to the carnival in Hyco, Texas.
Okay.
And after they went to the DQ and got hot fudge sundaes, it was so good, Susan went back and got a second hot fudge sundae.
Good for her. She's living the wild life.
What do I love, honey?
You love hot fudge sundaes?
I do.
From Andy's.
I do.
Andy's, if you're out there.
Just no cherry on top.
Yeah.
I don't like the maraschino cherry.
Yeah.
but I live for a good hot fudge sundae. I really do. I was saying this to Rob the other day. Hot fudge goes with everything.
Well, here's the thing. I was out and about just a couple of weeks ago, and I texted her, and I said, hey, I'm going to stop by Andy's. Do you want a hot fudge sundae? And I didn't get a reply right away, so I went ahead and got it. And on my way home, I did get the text, no, that's okay. So I get home, walk up to her office. I said, here. She goes, well, I told you I didn't want one. I said, here. She was like, okay, thank you. A few minutes later, she's like, oh, that was so good. I'm glad you brought that to me.
Yeah. The flip side of that is I texted Rob, I'm stopping at Andy's to get a hot fudge sundae. Do you want anything? And when I didn't hear from him,
she didn't give me
I
anything.
didn't get him one.
What's that old saying that your dad always says? What's mine is hers, and what's hers is also hers.
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my gosh, we digress. But also living in Stephenville, Texas, at the same time that Susan is now a free single woman, is a boy named Joseph Scott Hatley. His family and friends called him Scotty.
Uh-oh. And for those of you who don't know, that's the name of our dog.
That's our dog's name.
Yep.
Scotty was born in 1965. According to him, his mother was abusive. She slapped him around a lot.
Oh, wow.
Scotty's mother is going to deny all of this.
Okay.
But Scotty says all the abuse enraged him, but he kept it all to himself. He kept it all bottled up inside.
Can't be good.
But not only did his mama treat him poorly, Scotty was a heavy kid. He and his sister Regina, they're both overweight, and they're both teased about their weight a lot at school. And his sister would cry herself to sleep at night over it, and Scotty would go to bed fantasizing about exacting his revenge on the people who were mean to his sister.
Oh, my.
Scotty was a daydreamer, and he had lots of questions about how everything in the world worked, like sex, things like sex, which was a subject his parents refused to talk to him about.
Okay.
But he would see stories of sexual violence in the news, and he said it stirred something inside of him that he couldn't explain. His family's very religious, like to the point where they would debate and discuss scripture over dinner. And he believed in God and Satan and that they were tangible beings.
Okay.
Scotty will later write that when he was in church, he'd be in the front pew trying his best to understand all these feelings he had and how he was supposed to reconcile that with his God. But when he's 12, his favorite choir director is fired, and he just up and quit church. He was done with Jesus.
Really?
And now, with his parents not talking with him about his feelings, and he's away from his church where at first he thought he would find some guidance, he's now sitting at home daydreaming about things like walking into his school and killing everybody in sight.
Yeah, okay.
And this is the 70s.
Yeah.
So this isn't like school shootings that we have now.
Yeah.
He was thinking it way back then.
Yeah, because it was pretty much unheard of back then.
Yes, but that's how he was feeling on the inside. On the outside, he was just this blonde kid with a bowl haircut who played baseball, basketball, and football. He loved the Dallas Cowboys and Roger Staubach. He was a Cub Scout. One of his sister's friends will later say he was Beaver Cleaver. He was just a pudgy, nerdy kid who wasn't very popular in school.
Gotcha.
When he's 13, he began hanging out with his sister and her friends as they cruised the drag. One of them one night gave him a beer, and he found that he loved the alcohol because it would slow down his overactive brain.
Okay.
Quote, "From the first buzz, I knew that alcohol was what I craved, what I needed, and what I had to have," end quote.
It's not good.
But booze wasn't his only vice, because Scotty liked porn. And back then it meant nudie magazines.
Yeah.
And he had a stash of them and some vodka in his parents' house. Which makes me think of Step Brothers when they're in the tree house.
The tree house.
But you got a pretty awesome collection of nudie mags.
And he's like, I hate your guts, but I really admire
your
collection. Yeah.
Oh.
By the time he's at Stephenville High School, he's not involved in sports anymore, and he doesn't date. He would arrange his classes so he could leave school early and help his dad at work. But interestingly enough, Scotty is Susan's best friend's cousin. So Cindy, remember Cindy, her best
Yeah,
friend?
yeah.
Cindy and Scotty are cousins.
Oh, okay.
And Cindy said he might have been quiet in school, but around the family, he was a pushy know-it-all. He was kind of pushy and loud.
Right.
Cindy's mom and Scotty's mom were sisters, and these two spent Christmases and Thanksgivings together. Scotty turned into the kid who thought he was smarter than everybody else. And when Cindy told the man who would eventually become her husband, Roy, she tells Roy, talk to Scotty, because they both loved books. But Roy didn't like the story Scotty liked to read.
Which was what?
Quote, Roy was kind of put off by Scotty's preoccupation with true crime.
So we're contributing to the delinquency of the youth of America.
Apparently, especially stories of serial killers like Son of Sam, end quote.
Wow.
I read that and I was like, oh,
No.
okay.
Okay.
In 1984, Scotty's senior year, that was my senior year, he joined the Air Force Reserve and was training at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth to become a munitions specialist. But when he graduated, he went to reservist training in San Antonio, Texas, before transferring to Colorado for technical school at Lowry Air Force Base just outside of Denver.
Okay.
And while he's there, he meets a girl from Ohio.
Hey, there you go.
Now, Scotty had never kissed a girl.
Wow. How old is he now?
Well, he's out of high school, 18.
Wow. I thought mine was, 13? I thought I was late.
So he's never kissed a girl, and he meets this girl from Ohio, and he said it was love at first sight. After they slow danced one night to Prince's Purple Rain. Purple rain, purple rain. On the weekends, they made love in cheap hotels, and he was just so daggone happy that he asked her to be his wife, and they got married.
Good grief. Wow.
Their parents and the commanding officers were less than pleased.
Yeah.
After training ended, Scotty didn't want to enlist in the Air Force, but his wife did. And she was stationed in Guam. And after a few months away from each other, he went there to join her. But when he arrived, he felt like something was off.
Really?
Quote, there was a story in her eyes I couldn't read, end quote.
What does that mean?
I think it means that, you know, when they were together, it was one thing, but then when she was by herself, she learned to be on her own. And when he came to Guam, she was like, okay, you're kind of like messing with
You're invading
who I am now. Yeah.
You're invading my space.
So at first they were okay. He got a job as an insurance agent selling policies to service members, but the magic of the Purple Rain was gone. And these two fought every single day.
Wow.
So he decided he needed to go back to Jesus. He needed to pray. So he did. And when things didn't improve, he then pledged his life to Satan.
Whoa.
He gathered up some candles, got on his knees, and asked Satan to get him out of his situation. And he said he would give his soul for his freedom. And when he's older, of course, he regrets this.
You think?
Yeah, he regrets doing this.
Wow.
This memory would plague him for the rest of his life.
Wow.
Now, he's drinking even more heavily at this point, and when his performance at the insurance company begins to wane, his commissions dry up, and he started forging company checks with the office copy machine.
Yeah.
Those can't be very good
I
forgeries.
was going to say.
Yeah,
Or that's a really good copy machine.
maybe it is.
Yeah.
And while this is happening, although I don't think any of the copy machines were good in 1984, 1985,
Yes.
just saying.
Yep.
But while this is happening, Scotty thinks his wife is having an affair. So he called his mom, he calls his mama, and she told him, come home. Just come on home.
Okay.
He's now 21 years old. He went back to Texas and went to work for his dad. And when he got back on his feet, he rented an apartment. He wanted to start his life over. So he asked people to call him by his first name, Joseph.
Okay.
We're going to keep calling him Scotty.
Okay. Now, they're not divorced yet, right?
They're going to be.
Okay. Okay. But he left and he came back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's in the middle of a divorce.
I'm trying to keep track of who's
Yeah.
hitched up and who isn't.
Yeah. But while his wife is divorcing him, his old boss was threatening to put him in jail for embezzlement if he didn't pay back what he had taken. So Scotty takes out a bank loan and he pays it back.
Okay.
Now, all Scotty did was work and drink. He would black out. He was mixing vodka and cough syrup.
Ooh.
And eventually he was adding Pepsi to that. He would get a big 44-ounce soft drink cup from the Sonic, and then he would hide it all in there, like his cough syrup and his alcohol.
Wow.
His social life, again, was with his sister Regina, or just driving around the country for hours listening to Motley Crue and drinking. That sounds like a really bad idea.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, at least it could be England Dan and John Ford Cole.
I was talking about the drinking and driving.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. I missed that.
He's back to hanging out with his sister again. He played cards with Regina and Cindy and Roy and a few others. They called themselves the members of the Round Table. And that was fun until he started sleeping with one of them who happened to be married. Everyone was worried about him, and he was incredibly unhappy. He's just basically a broken alcoholic.
Yeah.
Then one night, his cousin Cindy brought her best friend to the Round Table to play cards. Her name was Susan Woods.
Oh.
And even though Susan was 8 years older than he was, he knew who she was. He knew who her ex-husband Michael was. He was the guy who sold him his first joint.
Oh, really?
And of course, Michael says he never sold weed to anybody.
Right.
But he met her for the first time. And Scotty flirted with Susan, and he thought she was flirting back with him. He was smitten, immediately smitten. So remember, he's only been with this one girl that he followed to Guam, that he married.
Sounds like the kind of guy that if a girl shows him any kind of attention, he immediately assumes that, hey, she's into me.
She's hot for me.
Yeah, exactly.
She's totally into me.
Yeah. Wow.
That's called delusion.
Yeah, a little bit.
The next Sunday after they meet, July 26th, 1987, after a drunken drive, Scotty decides to swing by Susan's house, unannounced and uninvited. But she asked him inside, and they listened to a few records and smoked a few cigarettes. At some point in the night, Scotty overstepped his bounds. He made a pass at her. He tried to kiss her, or he got fresh with her in some way, and Susan slapped him in the face.
Uh-oh.
Have you ever been slapped in the face?
I have not.
I've slapped a couple faces. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I've never been slapped.
According to Scotty, after that, everything was a blur. Of course, everything's a blur
Of
after
course,
that.
yeah.
He beat, raped, and sodomized Susan. According to him, when it was finished, that's when he realized he had sexually assaulted her.
Yeah, right.
And Susan was saying to him that she was going to tell what he had done to her. And then, according to Scotty, she changed her mind and said she wouldn't tell anyone if he would just let her go. And he asked her if she believed in God. And she said she did. So he told her, you need to pray.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was when he tried to smother her with a pillow from her bed. There was a white extension cord somewhere in the house. He tried to strangle her with that. Then with her hands tied behind her back with a tank top, he put half of her body face down in a bathtub full of water.
Wow.
To this day, it is unknown if she died of asphyxiation, strangulation, or drowning.
Jeez.
After he drove home, past the police station, where he considered pulling in and just turning himself in, he doesn't do it.
Right.
Right.
Of course he doesn't.
Susan then missed her next 2 days of work at Norton Industries. She worked at a sandpaper factory. So she's missed 2 days in a row. This never happens. And when it does, her supervisor called her father, Joe. And Joe knows immediately that something is wrong. She never missed work without telling someone what was happening.
Sure.
So he drives to her home. Her house is dark and her front door is unlocked. Joe will find his daughter Susan in the bathroom off the rear bedroom. Her head was sunk into a bathtub full of black water. He called the police from Susan's living room and then waited in the front yard for them to arrive. Sergeant Donnie Hensley was the first on the scene around 9 p.m. He asks Joe what he's doing there, and he says, quote, Donnie, they killed her, end quote.
Wow.
Now, her dad, Joe Atkins, is in shock. Donnie huddled up with his old friend and they pray, and he urged him, go home. You need to go home. You've got to tell your wife. You need to tell your family.
Right.
And it's about this time that her best friend Cindy drives up to the house when she sees all the police cars there. Remember, this is a small town.
Sure.
And according to the neighbors, they could hear Cindy screaming 2 blocks away.
Jeez.
Inside at the crime scene, the police start taking photos and looking at the scene. The medical examiner would say that she'd been raped and sodomized. She had a red line across her throat where Scotty had tried to strangle her. The bedroom looked like there'd been a struggle. The mattress was halfway off the bed, and this white electrical cord was across the bed with the plug end on the floor. On the bed was a pillowcase stained with Susan's mascara, where he had tried to suffocate her with her own pillow. Now remember, this is a town of 13,000 people.
Right.
There aren't murders there.
Right.
But they do a good job of securing the crime scene, and they managed to get 2 good sets of fingerprints and a palm print. But it's 1987,
Right.
and we're years away from DNA.
Sure.
There was a Diet Coke can on the coffee table in the living room and several cigarette butts in the ashtray. But Susan wasn't really a smoker, and she only drank water. She never had caffeine. The police go door to door, but no one had seen anything out of the ordinary. The next day, Lieutenant Ken Maltby announced to all the other officers that he and he alone would be taking over the case. No other detectives.
Really?
Yeah, and the other detectives, the other police officers have now come out to say they think he just wanted to be a hero. 4 days later, a story about the murder came out in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram.
Right.
Quote, "I wish with all my heart that I could tell you that I mourned for what I had done, but that would be a lie. Reading about it in the paper was a high like I had never known before," end quote.
So this was Scotty reading that
Yes.
thing. Okay.
And he's getting a huge turn on
Gotcha.
from reading the newspaper article where he had killed Susan.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm with you.
Scotty went to Susan's funeral and even signed the guest book.
Jeez.
He saw all the police officers. He wasn't even worried. And after the roundtable group got back together again, they would play cards, and during a few of their drunken nights, the group would debate over who had murdered Susan. And during these discussions, Scotty would call the local police the Keystone Cops. And later, Scotty will even say that he couldn't believe that he was never interviewed. He'd been with Susan and the whole crew just a week prior to her murder. But the police never go to these people of the round table.
Right.
They go to a couple of them, but not Scotty.
Wow. I wonder why.
They just didn't do it. Well, remember, this one guy takes over the investigation.
Yeah.
But Scotty continues to hang out at his sister Regina's house. He's drinking and smoking into the wee hours of the night. And it's then that he notices Regina's new next-door neighbors from Arkansas had a daughter. Her name was Shannon Myers. She's 15 years old.
Jeez.
Now, Shannon was a rebel-rouser. She liked to party. She would go to Tarleton State University for frat parties. And Shannon's mom, by this point, has kind of given up trying to keep her daughter on a short leash.
Okay.
And therefore, Shannon came and went as she pleased.
I can't even imagine being at a frat party at 15 years old.
I could barely handle them when I was 20.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Shannon quickly became friends with Regina and Scotty's cousin, Melissa, because Melissa would babysit Regina's 2 kids during the summer months, and Shannon and Melissa started hanging out together that summer.
Okay.
Now, it's around this same time that Scotty meets Shannon. He's 7 years older than she is. These two strike up a friendship. Scotty would talk to Shannon, something that she felt others really didn't do, and he actually listened to her. And Shannon has said that she saw the sweet, caring side of Scotty. What no one knows is that Shannon is being sexually abused by someone close to her family at the same time. So she liked it that Scotty actually seemed to care about her.
Right.
Then one night, while sitting on Regina's couch, Scotty kissed 15-year-old Shannon, and that was the beginning of their relationship. The next night, they had sex at Regina's house, which, by the way, is statutory rape.
Well, yeah, I was going to say. And how old is he again at this point? What, 22, 23?
22, 23.
Okay, yeah.
But these two kind of fell into a routine. Shannon would go out partying most nights, drive home in her Mercury Cougar. She would smell cigarette smoke and know that Scotty was in his sister's backyard waiting for her.
Okay.
Shannon would wander over. She and Scotty would have sex, mostly in one of Regina's bathrooms.
Jeez.
He would call her, quote, special, or the special one, end quote. But after weeks of these two hooking up in Regina's bathroom, her mother discovers what's going on. And she's not too happy that her daughter, who was 15, and Scotty, who was 23, were together.
I'd be on the phone to the police.
And her mother actually confronts Scotty in a Kmart parking lot. And Scotty promised to end the relationship. And Shannon told her mother that she and Scotty were ending it. It's over.
Right.
But they did not end the relationship.
Wow.
Scotty rented an apartment, and that's where these two started hooking up. And by the time September rolls around, Scotty is changing the way he treats Shannon. So just a few months in.
Right.
They were having sex, and then suddenly it was more forceful and more aggressive, and he had a crazy look in his eyes. And when Shannon tells Scotty that he's hurting her, and eventually she tells him to stop, Scotty took a knife out and held it to Shannon's throat.
Whoa.
Now, instead of fighting, she let him have his way, mostly because she had her little dog with her that night, and the dog was growling at Scotty, and she was afraid that he would hurt her dog.
Wow.
But after it's over, she pushed him off of her, she picked up the dog, and she ran. And while she's walking home, Scotty pulls up alongside her in his pickup truck, asking her if he could give her a ride home. Now, at first she says no, but then he said, "I'm sorry," and the crazy look he had before was gone. So she got into the truck. He put his hand gently on her face and said, quote, "I love you," end quote.
Oh, jeez.
And she told him, "I love you too." But when she gets home, Shannon does tell her mother about what happened, about the assault, and her mom insisted that they go to the police. And while the police are talking to Shannon and she tells them she has this ongoing relationship, a sexual relationship with Scotty Hatley, and instead of really taking her seriously, they judged her as being a wild child.
What?
And they thought that Shannon was crazy. And the police were so uninterested in pressing charges that Scotty didn't even have to contest this accusation.
Good grief.
Yeah. So she tells them, well, we're in we've been in a relationship. And they're like, well, you're 15-year-old wild child. So what? He held a knife to your throat and forced you to have sex. So what? He raped you.
And he's 22.
Yeah. So that was real rape and statutory rape, right?
Jeez.
So Scotty's murdered Susan, now raped Shannon at knife point. And the police say to him when they meet up with him, quote, "This is a screwed up little girl," end quote.
Oh, my gosh.
They're like on his side.
Wow.
The police tell Scotty, just stay away from her. Now, they've had a sexual murder, and when another female tells them that she was raped at knife point, they didn't even think to question him about Susan's murder. Shannon was really upset that the police didn't believe her, so she cut ties with Scotty, but she continued to hang out with Melissa, the young girl, and Scotty's cousin who babysat for Regina. And she would only go to the house during the daytime when she knew Scotty would not be there.
Right.
But one day he did show up while Shannon was there, and Shannon overheard Scotty and Regina fighting, and Scotty is telling his sister Regina that he loves Shannon, and his sister yells at him, and she says she's only 15.
Yeah.
And even though he's making fun of the police being idiots, he was really worried that they were after him. He was a little paranoid even.
Right.
Because he lives near the police station, remember?
Right.
And he would see these cruisers driving past his apartment, and he would wince every single time. But all this time, he's relentlessly calling Shannon and sending her letters. He's stalking her.
Right.
Meanwhile, as the Susan Woods murder case moves on, Lieutenant Maltby only investigated the murder for about 2 months, and he gets nowhere. Then in October of 1987, this lieutenant took over the narcotics unit, and Sergeant Donnie Hensley, the first man on the scene and Joe Atkins' friend, takes up the case in his spare time.
Okay.
And when he did, there weren't any notes left behind by Lieutenant Maltby. Nothing from the people he'd interviewed. There were no notes on the murder.
So he didn't keep a record of anything.
Nobody really knows.
Wow.
So he had to start from scratch. But Susan's remains were so badly decomposed, her upper body was in the water for at least 2 days. It was still unclear whether she'd been smothered, strangled, or drowned. But there was no sign of forced entry into her home, so Susan was either murdered by someone she knew or a stranger she'd allowed into her home.
Right.
So, no forced entry. He thinks that it was somebody she knew.
Right.
And the longer he looked at the crime scene, the more he scratched his head. He interviewed her friends and family and realized that she lived this very quiet life.
Okay.
She had, however, called her friend over and confessed to Cindy as well that the guy she'd been dating, this J.C. Bauman, the bartender, had gotten frisky with her.
Okay.
And she was upset about the hickeys on her neck.
Right.
So they go and question J.C., who seemed to be a really nice guy, and he passes a polygraph test.
Right.
Then they questioned Cindy's boyfriend, who would go on to be her husband, Roy Hayes. Why? Well, he had helped Susan around the house, and he had nailed all the windows shut. But according to Sergeant Hensley, Roy also played, get this, Dungeons and Dragons. And at that time, in a small town in Texas, he said it was like flirting with the devil.
Oh, jeez.
Playing Dungeons and Dragons.
All right.
They ask Roy to take a polygraph after they question him, and he too passes with flying colors. By the time they are hanging Christmas lights in Stephenville, Susan's murder is cold. It's a cold case.
Right.
But everybody in town was saying the same thing to Sergeant Hensley. They all knew who the killer was.
Oh, really?
It was that hippie ex-husband of hers. The guy who left the 30-minute-long tape about how she was a bitch and she was to blame for their divorce.
Wow.
And the gossipers in town weren't the only ones who believed it. Susan's parents believed it too. Susan's father was in the police station every single week saying that Michael Woods was his daughter's killer because he'd left all those threatening notes on top of the cassette tape he left.
Sure.
So where was Michael? Well, he'd been living quietly in a tent inside a dilapidated house his brother bought for nothing in Indiana. These two spent their time renovating it into 4 apartments until one day the Indianapolis police showed up.
Okay.
Now, he and his brother had been into it with the neighbors about parking, and Michael agrees to go down to the police station. But once he's there, they start asking him about his life in Texas, and he realizes this doesn't have anything to do about the parking.
Right.
They're questioning him about Susan and whether he'd gone back to Texas. And Michael's confused, and when he tells them, no, I haven't been to Texas, they say, quote, well, you're lying. We know you killed her. She's dead. You killed her, end quote.
Wow.
So this is how Michael finds out that Susan has been murdered.
Jeez.
And after they tell him, he rushes to the bathroom, he throws up, and when he gets back into the interrogation room, they're grilling him. And they're saying to him, well, you did it. We know you did it. And we'll get you into a mental hospital if you just admit it. And he's like, quote, dudes, I have nothing to do with this, end quote.
Wow.
I loved it that he said dudes.
Yeah.
When they asked him to sign a statement, Michael said, no way. And he demanded an attorney, and he walked out of the police station. And this is when the harassment started by the Indianapolis police. They think they have a killer, and they don't have anything to prove it, so they just keep pushing him, hoping he's going to break at some point.
Yeah.
And his attorney is telling him not to cooperate in any way, but eventually Michael had over a dozen people who swore they had seen him in Indianapolis around the time that Susan was murdered. He's got an alibi.
Right.
But what was killing the cops back in Texas was that they only really needed his fingerprints to prove he was there. Because remember, they have fingerprints and a palm print.
Yeah.
So back in Stephenville, Susan's family has been making a big deal of the fact that Michael had taken not only the couple's yellow Mustang, but also a fur coat and a series of crystal figurines that they thought belonged to Susan. And this gave Sergeant Hensley an idea. If they could arrest Michael for theft, they could get his fingerprints. So he has a search warrant drawn up, and he goes with the Indianapolis cops to Michael's house. They tear it apart. They take almost everything, including a marijuana roach clip in his sister-in-law's purse. So they arrested Michael and his brother, put them in jail, and let them out the next day, never taking them to court. No charges are ever pursued.
What's going on?
But Sergeant Henley got his prints, and he was so anxious to get Michael for Susan's murder, he was drawing up the extradition request. That is, until he finds out that the prints don't match.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just can't believe it. Their minds are blown.
Yeah.
There had to be some explanation for this. Everybody in Stephenville, Texas knew that Michael Woods had murdered his soon-to-be ex-wife, Susan.
Yeah.
But they had absolutely nothing. 10 months after Susan's murder, Shannon is trying to date again. But she's dating boys her own age this time.
Right.
And after a bad breakup and 2 months later, she agrees to see Scotty. It's July of 1988, a year after he's murdered Susan Woods. Scotty asks to talk to her, saying that he missed her. And she tells him that she misses him too, but she doesn't really trust him. She's a little bit afraid.
Sure.
As she should be.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody that holds a knife to your throat.
Yeah.
She's probably got a good reason.
Yeah. A few weeks later, Scotty called her at home one night saying over and over that he wanted to see her. He tells her he really wants to explain why he did what he did. And Shannon, who is now 16 years old, was ready for some answers. She's like, okay.
Okay.
So these two meet up in a laundromat parking lot. And Shannon has since said that the very moment she climbed into his truck, she knew she had made a big mistake.
Yeah.
Scotty drives away and he locks the doors on his truck, telling her to come and sit beside him. So, it's like a bench seat.
Right.
Slide over here. And he had that odd sound to his voice, she said, and that look in his eye. And he was being aggressive. So she did what she was told because she was afraid.
Right.
He's telling her that they were destined to be together. And she softened a little bit when he says this, as he's telling her over and over how much he loves her. I love you so much. Then Scotty pulls up to a roadside park on the south side of Stephenville, and he parks out of sight. He presses her to have sex with him, and when she said no, Scotty slapped her in the face.
Jeez.
They got out of the truck and sat on a picnic table where Scotty started taking off Shannon's clothes. These two end up having sex, but it was brutal. He hit her. He hit her so hard he knocked her out.
Good Lord.
And when she came to, she felt blood coming out of her ear. He would rape her repeatedly, only taking breaks to smoke and have a drink. Wow. And Shannon, the whole time, she's thinking, he's going to kill me and hide me in these bushes.
Yeah.
So she starts tossing her things around, a hairpin, her bra, the barrette she was wearing. She's hoping if this guy murders her, that the police will find these things. She's 16, and this is what she's thinking.
Smart.
Then when he raped her again, he pressed her face into a puddle of water on the ground. He will rape Shannon on and off for 6 hours.
Oh, man.
He laid on top of her and told her if she didn't mind him, he would kill her.
Man.
And he had done it before.
Oh, wow. So he confessed.
I'll kill you because I've done it before.
Wow.
I've killed before. And as all of this is happening, she's thinking, if I act like I love him, maybe he will let me live.
Wow.
He put her in the cab of his truck and told her he wanted her to sit close to him. But she was afraid if she sat too close that he would see her face, what he had done to her.
Sure.
And then he really would kill her to keep her quiet.
Right.
So she kept her head down and in the dark, and when he asked her if she was okay, she told him, quote, I'm okay. I just want to start my life without you, end quote.
Whoa. Okay.
He told her he was sorry for what he had just done, and she said, quote, it's okay. I love you. I just need to listen to you, end quote. And when he tells her not to turn him in, she says, I'm not going to say a word. And Scotty believed her.
Oh, man. Okay.
He drove her back to the laundromat parking lot at dawn. She ran home. She fell into her stepfather's arms, and her stepdad and her mother took her straight to the emergency room. This time, her account was taken seriously.
Right.
The nurses administered a rape kit. It wasn't clear if any of them had done it before. It was very awkward when they were using this rape kit. And because of the attack, because it had occurred outside of the city limits, the investigation fell on the Erath County Sheriff's Office, whose deputies soon arrived at the hospital to interview Shannon.
Okay.
She's badly bruised and bloody, but she's still alive. And Shannon Myers told them everything.
Wow.
The next morning, the sheriff came a-knocking on Scotty's door, and when he didn't come to the door, he was standing at the door with his gun in his hand. He was ready to shoot the sheriff.
Wow.
The sheriff leaves the house, but Scotty knows they're going to be back.
Right.
So he packs his go bag. He puts clothes, a gun. He goes to the bank. He withdraws all his money. He drives west without a plan as to where he's going to go. He stops in El Paso for the night, and then he heads to Las Vegas.
Okay.
He drinks and gambles, and soon he's broke.
Yeah.
And according to Scotty, he put his gun in his mouth more than once. Finally, when he's totally broke, he tries on a pair of $120 tennis shoes, then points his gun at the salesgirl's face and walks away. And he liked the rush that it gave him, making her afraid. So he decided to rob a hotel clerk.
Jeez.
But the guy behind the desk didn't speak English. And this guy behind the desk just ended up giving Scotty a bunch of coins. And Scotty had to abort that robbery, even though he was ready to shoot this guy,
Right.
because a witness walked up to the outside door. Now, the next day, he's thinking about where he's going to rob next when a policeman on a motorcycle rides up behind him. Then 3 patrol cars are with the motorcycle, and they hit the lights and tell him to pull over. And when he's parked his truck in the Denny's parking lot, he thought about just starting a gunfight. But he crawled out of the truck and he laid flat on the pavement.
Wow.
And they arrest Scotty Hatley. They put him in a holding tank, and the whole time he's thinking, the Stephenville police are on their way to take me back to Texas and try me for rape and murder.
Right.
But no one ever showed up.
What? Why not?
It didn't. They just didn't make the connection at all.
Oh, wow.
And when his robbery case went to trial, he's convicted. But the judge saw that he was only 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of giving him 30 years in prison for each sentence, he gave him 120 days in a youth offender program.
This guy's got 9 lives.
Yeah. After this, his parents come and pick him up and take him back to Stephenville, and he's worried about the rape charges. But while Scotty is gone, his parents have actually fought to keep him from being indicted by a grand jury for rape and battery.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. His mother went to their church and pretty much had the entire congregation to say that Scotty was a wonderful boy. His parents hired a private investigator who attacked Shannon's character because in Texas at that time, if you could prove the victim was promiscuous, the rape charge could be dismissed.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And Scotty was clean cut. He was from Stephenville. Shannon was an outsider. And the grand jury declined to indict Scotty. And of course, because grand juries make their decisions in secret, Shannon never really knows why. She doesn't know what went on in there.
Yeah.
But Shannon is thinking that Scotty's going to be gone for a while because of the robberies in Vegas.
Right.
So when she sees him in town just a few months later, she's freaking out. He would follow her. He followed her to a fraternity party. He followed her to a skating rink. When she left and went home, Scotty's truck was already in his sister Regina's driveway right next door. And this time, Shannon called him on the carpet. She yelled at him while standing in the front yard. She told him to stop following her. And she says to him, quote, "You know what you did to me," end quote.
Wow.
And after that, Scotty backed off. Now, Shannon is suffering from PTSD. She tried working with a therapist, but she sank into a deep depression, just like Michael Woods in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Years passed, but nobody ever told Michael Woods he'd been eliminated as a suspect. Remember, they got his fingerprints.
Yeah.
It wasn't a match. They never went back to him and said, "You're not on the list anymore."
So they just left him hanging.
Left him hanging.
Jeez.
And while he's trying to play gigs in Indianapolis, a national news story breaks that basically insinuated that he was Susan's killer. And people would come up to him in between sets when he's playing a gig and say, "Hey, aren't you that guy that killed his wife and got away with it?"
Man.
And I read in one of the interviews with him, he was like, "That pretty much ruins your night."
Yeah, pretty much.
Eventually, the Atkins family tied up the loose ends. Susan had a life insurance policy that Michael was the beneficiary of, $11,000. In 1989, her family sued Michael, saying he was responsible for her death. He refused to return to Texas for the trial. The judge awarded the $11,000 to the family and hit Michael with an additional $700,000 fine.
Oh, my God.
But as long as he stayed out of Texas, this could never be collected. Scotty hightails it out of Stephenville. He's gotten away with 2 rapes and a murder. He moved to Nashville. And in 1993, he got married and had 2 kids and became a truck driver.
Okay.
And while he's out on the road, he has honed his skills of picking up broken women in roadside bars. But after an accident, which he was cleared of, he took a job at a grocery warehouse. He's still drinking every single night.
No surprise.
Yeah. His daughter was in a serious car accident, and his wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Then a tornado destroyed the apartment complex where they lived, so they moved to a duplex where a drunk driver plowed through the home. And Scotty's looking back to that moment where he lit the candles and pledged his allegiance to Satan.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, Scotty thinks he's being punished.
Yeah.
In the late 90s, Scotty took a job in Texas, Round Rock, Texas. But he's still drinking and his marriage is hanging on by a thread.
Well, I'm surprised it's hung on this long.
Yeah. Also hanging by a thread is Michael Woods. He goes into a deep depression. He works out all the time because he's worried that he's going to be sent to prison, and he's not a big guy. So he stopped performing, and he even attempted suicide. And at this point, after a breakdown on the 18th anniversary of Susan's murder, 18 years, people,
Amazing.
he tells a friend, Barbara Gray, the whole entire story. And she decided she was going to try to help him. So she sent an email to the Stephenville Police Department.
Oh.
Now, by this time, another officer, Don Miller, had taken up the cold case. It was one of 3 unsolved murders in Stephenville. They tested the DNA from the cigarette butts in Susan's living room because now, 18 years later, DNA is a thing.
Right.
And the results came back unidentified male.
Yeah, of course.
Don called Barbara Gray after reading her email. He tells Barbara that if Michael wanted closure, he needed to talk to him. Then 5 months go by, and finally, Don gets Michael on the phone. Now, remember, he's got this $700,000 thing hanging over his head.
Sure.
And he thinks that they still think he is a suspect for the murder.
Right.
Don goes to Indianapolis and collects a DNA sample from Michael, basically begging him to help them solve the case. And that if he's innocent, why not take the DNA test?
Right.
And when the results came back, they call him and said, "You're no longer a suspect."
They give him a Maury Povich.
18 years. 18 years.
You are not the murderer.
You are not a suspect. And Michael started crying. They have ruined this man's life.
Wow.
But now all the police have still is the prints lifted from Susan's bathroom mirror and tub. But in 1999, the FBI unveiled their national fingerprint database. And by 2006, they get the prints to Austin, Texas, and hand deliver them to the officer there. And a few days later, they get a call back and they say, "We have a match to your fingerprints."
Uh-oh.
His name is Joseph Scott Hatley.
There you go.
Now, Susan is murdered in 1987. It's not until 2006 that they're ready to go pick her killer up and hold him accountable.
Jeez.
It was June 6th, 2006. Sergeant Miller had tracked down Scotty to Round Rock, Texas. The local police pick him up, and he went voluntarily to the police station. When they get him in the interrogation room and Sergeant Miller and his partner sit down with him, they tell him, this is why we're here.
Right.
The murder of Susan Woods. And Scotty is really calm and says, "I didn't have anything to do with that." Quote, "I might have had sex with her. I don't remember. I don't think so." End quote.
Jeez.
Whatever, Scotty.
Yeah,
They
whatever.
have your fingerprints.
Right.
And that is enough to arrest him. They get his DNA from a swab. He tells police that lots of members of the Round Table had been to Susan's house. And while all of this is happening, a Round Rock officer tells Sergeant Miller of Stephenville that Scotty's wife is considering charges of her own
Really?
for battery.
Oh.
He's beating up his wife who has MS.
Oh, man, what a scumbag.
Now, the next day, they interview him again. He hasn't been, arrested. They're interviewing him and letting him go because they take his DNA. They've got his fingerprints.
Right.
He bails out, he bonds out,
Mm-hmm.
and then they take his DNA. But the next day, they interview him again, and this time, Scotty tells Sergeant Miller that he had had a kinky affair with Susan. And while this is happening, unbeknownst to Scotty, his wife is bringing charges for domestic abuse. And when they let him go again, he's off eating at the IHOP, and the police show up and arrest him.
Right in the middle of the pancakes.
Right in the middle of the pancakes. All you can eat pancakes.
It's like in draft day, you...
Pancake eating motherfucker.
Yes, that's exactly what he was, a pancake eating. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, by this time, the DNA comes back as a match to what is found at the scene of the murder, cigarette butts with Scotty's DNA. Now, before they actually arrest Scotty, Sergeant Miller told Susan's dad, Joe, we've tracked him down, we've got the guy, and they go to Joe, who's out on the golf course. But Joe refused to believe that Susan's killer was anybody but Michael Woods. He just had it in his head.
Wow.
It was Michael Woods. And everybody in Stephenville is stunned. They can't believe it. Even Susan's best friend, Cindy, and her husband, Roy, don't believe it.
Jeez.
By the way, when they accused Roy, it really took the wind out of his sails, and it screwed up his plan to go into law enforcement. He wanted to be a police officer. So he's still a little bit butthurt over that.
Sure.
But Sergeant Miller told them, well, we have the DNA evidence. It's him.
Yeah.
They called Michael to tell him the news. He was in the middle of taking a college class when they phoned. Quote, I hadn't had a cigarette in a year.
Yeah.
My professor who came out with me gave me one.
Wow.
I needed it. I cried a little. It was surreal. They finally got him. I was beginning to think they never would, end quote. So he knew that he was no longer a suspect.
Right.
But they called to tell him, we got the guy.
Good.
Now, it took a little bit to track down Shannon Myers. She'd really gone into hiding. But after vindication and a lot of therapy, she goes on to get married. The police admitted that they had totally screwed that up.
Right.
Not only the first assault, which was in Erith County, the sheriff's case, it went on without prosecution. They didn't say anything to the Stephenville police when the second accusation was made. This is county and city, and this is in a big place.
Wow.
And when they pulled those files, what they read floored them. Because in Shannon's interview, she said, quote, he laid on top of me and told me if I didn't mind him, he would kill me. The next words were, he told her, quote, he had done it before, end quote.
Yeah. Right.
There wasn't a trial. Scotty saw the evidence they had against him, and he cut a deal like 2 days before the trial, maybe a week.
Right.
And the deal was to serve 30 years. After, he was sent to the prison in Huntsville, where he found God once more. And while he was there, he wrote a manifesto.
Really?
He wrote about his life and why he had done the things he had done, or questioned why he had done the things he had done.
Okay.
In 2017, Scotty is diagnosed with bladder cancer. And the following year, he is released on good behavior after only serving 11 years of his 30-year sentence.
Wow. So he killed somebody, raped somebody, and gets 11 years.
Yeah. He raped two girls.
Well, two girls, right. Yeah.
Right. And killed somebody.
Because he was a good boy.
And he was abusing his wife.
Jeez.
Yeah. 11 years of a 30-year sentence.
Wow.
His cancer had gone into remission, but he goes into a halfway house. He finds a job, but then he was laid off during COVID. He moved into an RV park outside of Abilene to be near one of his daughters. He was sober for a little bit, but then started drinking again. And by October of 2021, Scotty's cancer was back and had spread to his spine. 6 weeks later, on December 9th, 2021, his landlord found him dead on the floor of his trailer. Scotty was 56 years old.
Man.
Now, not long after, a guy bought Scotty's RV, and when he's moving in, he found a ton of papers, all handwritten, and he'd read some of it and was freaking out. He wanted to be rid of it. He called the police, and Sergeant Miller got his hands on 200 pages. It was 200 pages about Scotty Hatley's life and why he had done the things he had.
Wow.
Quote, a basic investigation would have identified me in only a few days. Instead, the detectives decided it had to be the ex-husband. They honed in on him and never let up. Yet another one of my victims.
Jeez.
All these years later, I still do not know why I said that. I honestly do not know if I was mocking God or if I still had a little humanity left in me. All I know with certainty is that the last moments of Susan's life were spent in prayer. That night, I took the life of a kind, sweet, loving woman who never did anything to me but show me kindness. My God, I had become a monster, end quote.
Wow. Can you imagine finding that?
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
So this guy, Scotty, he just decimated so many lives everywhere he went.
Yeah.
And got away with it
Yeah.
for so long.
Right.
But he kind of died a horrible death all alone with cancer. I'm still angry about the 11 years of his 30-year sentence.
Yeah.
He should have rotted in prison.
Now, did the people finally accept the fact that Michael wasn't involved in this?
The people of the town have finally accepted the fact that it was Scotty and not Michael.
Right.
And but the damage is done.
Yeah.
You know, the damage is done. They ruined that man's life.
Right.
They absolutely ruined his life. He ruined Shannon's life. This young girl ruined her life as well.
Yeah.
But that is the story of Susan Woods and her killer, Scotty Hatley. And that's all I have to say about that.
I mean, what do you do when you're accused of something and everybody jumps on board and you had nothing to do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, what recourse do you have?
Yeah, he had none.
Gee whiz.
He had none. I mean,
For
they
18 years.
18 years. 18 years. And when they ruled him out with the fingerprints, they didn't tell him.
Yeah, I mean,
They just let him suffer.
That's just incredulous.
It's awful. It's totally awful. My heart goes out to this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I don't know how great of a guitar player he was or whatever, but that was his passion. And he was trying, he was playing gigs and stuff.
Yeah.
And people are coming up to him in between songs. Aren't you the guy who killed his wife and got away with it? Yeah.
Do we know what he's doing now?
I do not know what he's doing now. I don't know what he's doing now. I know he is still alive. Shannon is still alive.
Okay.
And, they've had to pick up the pieces of their life. They were both really depressed for a long time.
Yeah.
All because of Scotty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, from one guitar player to another, I hope you're doing good.
Yeah, me too. And Shannon, my heart goes out to you too.
There
You're
you
a
go.
fighter. Sister, you're a fighter.
Amen. All right, well, let's lighten it up and do a little bless your heart. All right, number one, I'm calling Unearthing the Undead.
Oh my gosh, is this about grave robbers?
A 70-year-old woman was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison for defrauding insurers by faking deaths and staging sham funerals while she worked at a Los Angeles mortuary.
Oh my gosh.
Jean Crump, 70, prepared bogus death certificates.
Jean.
I know. Bought a burial plot and in one instance buried a casket in a phony funeral, authorities said.
She spent some money on this whole thing.
Well, yeah, if you're getting insurance, I guess so. When insurers began to investigate, Crump exhumed a bodiless casket, filled it with a mannequin and cow bones to throw off the cremation workers, and had it cremated according to court papers.
They cremated a mannequin?
You got it, and cow bones.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the judge sentenced the elderly woman to prison because she showed little remorse.
Yeah. If you're doing that, you don't care. If you have zero respect for the dead, you don't care.
Man. All right, number two, doggy do's and don'ts.
Okay.
All right. A 25-year-old woman was arrested after crawling into a stranger's home through the doggy door.
It's a good thing our doggy door is small.
Yeah, it's actually a cat flap, but we won't tell
we
Scotty
don't tell
that.
Scotty it's cat flap.
Yeah, he'd have PTSD or something.
He'd be mad.
Yeah. A married couple in Weatherford, Texas, was awakened in the middle of the night by a loud noise.
Okay.
The husband investigated and found the doggy door damaged. All right.
Oh my gosh.
The homeowner doesn't have a dog and figured an animal had entered through the tiny entry.
So they had a dog door, but not a dog?
Well, I don't know if they bought the house and the dog door was already in, or if the dog had passed away.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Now I'm with you.
Yeah. Instead, the couple found Sarah Soto, described as a 4 feet, 11 inch tall and 110 pounds, in their bathtub, and she was naked.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is about the size of a Great Dane. So depending on who owned the house before him.
Yeah. Soto told the police she was just trying to use the phone.
By getting in the bathtub naked?
I guess.
Okay.
That was her big excuse.
Okay.
All right, number three, and finally. This isn't a great one, but I just love the title. Rectum It could have killed him. Patrick Stapleton apparently is quite the kidder. According to, I can't even say this. According to the Anderell County Police, the 22-year-old Stapleton shot a sleeping friend in the buttocks with what he believed was a BB gun.
Oh, no.
It turned out to be a .40 caliber handgun.
Oh, my gosh.
The shooting happened about 4 a.m. Wednesday in the home of Lithonian, all right? The victim was taken to the hospital where he was treated for non-life-threatening injuries.
I'm so sorry to this guy that I'm laughing about this.
Stapleton of Ashland, Virginia, was charged with second-degree assault and reckless endangerment.
Reckless rectum endangerment.
Rectumless endangerment. So there you go. There's your bless your hearts for this week.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? After he shot him, he had to be like, holy shit, I thought it was a BB gun.
Dude, I'm sorry.
Dude, I'm sorry. I wonder if alcohol was involved in that one.
No, not at all. Not at 4 a.m. in the morning. Of course not.
Probably
the only thing
not.
that was missing was White Castle.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com where there's a pull-down menu.
Yep.
While you're there, you can also suggest a case and tell us about your brush with true crime. Give us your own true crime story.
Please do.
That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.